Hello everyone, this is Frank Fillmore. Welcome to our InfoSphere Optim Query Capture Replay webinar. We're probably going to start here in another minute or so. It's just at the top of the hour, 11 a.m. East Coast time in the U.S. So welcome to everyone who's joined so far, and we should be getting started in the next minute or two. Again, welcome everyone. This is Frank Fillmore. I'm a principal in the Fillmore Group, and we are scheduled to deliver an InfoSphere Optim Query Capture Replay presentation. A couple of housekeeping notes as we get started. Number one, this webinar is being recorded. It's going to be placed on the web in a few hours after the presentation. So if any of your colleagues were not able to join today, they will be able to listen to the rebroadcast. We're also going to place the presentation itself. Usually immediately after the webcast, we get lots of emails from everyone who says, great presentation, I hope, and where are the notes? So those will be on the Fillmore Group's blog, and we'll point you to those, the location for that at the end of the webinar, and the material should all be available probably by this time tomorrow. In terms of interacting in the webinar, everybody is on mute except for me and my colleague Kim May. The reason we do that is we get a lot of background noise from people who are multitasking while they're on the webinar. So in order to participate in the webinar, please use the facilities available. There is a panel in the upper right-hand corner of your screen when you join the webinar, and there is a flyout button with an orange arrow that I'm pressing right now. Open this up, and this gives you the opportunity to use the chat facility and also to raise your hand. So you can raise your hand and indicate that you have a question, or you can place something in the chat, and occasionally I'll stop, review the chat, and see if there are any questions that have been asked. At the end of the webinar, if we have time, we may just open it up to voice, but I wanted to give you a chance to participate while we were in the midst of the webinar, and just right now we have about 35 people on the webinar. It would just be too noisy and too confusing to try to use voice-to-voice for everyone. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So our agenda today for InfoSphere Optim Query Capture Replay is first an introduction as to who we are. The second is to set the framework for why this product is necessary. It's a product that was just released, generally available in June, I believe. So relatively new, and it's not a new version of an existing product. This is first time out of the gate. So it's trying to address a problem which has existed but really hasn't had a solid solution before. So we're going to talk about holistically what some of those challenges are that you may have faced in your own shops, and the ways in which Query Capture Replay QCR might address that. We're going to talk about some realistic testing scenarios that you might run into. We'll talk about the product itself and how it works. We'll step you through some screens and let you see how you would proceed through a testing scenario and be able to validate that the SQL that you have in an existing application can run against a test environment, and we can measure things like the SQL efficiency, the performance of the SQL, and the impact that changes that you might make in the database are going to have in the way that your SQL works. We'll talk about some scenarios, different use cases for Query Capture Replay, including upgrading from one version of an existing database management system to another. We'll talk about moving from one database vendor to another. So you can actually use this product to validate not only the actual syntactical compatibility of your existing PLSQL if you're using an Oracle database to IBM DB2. That comes in at around 98% compatibility since IBM introduced that facility a couple of years ago, the ability to support PL/SQL workloads against the DB2 database and enabling that PL/SQL API within DB2. But now you can also see how well it will run. So Does something that used to run in 5 seconds now run in 5 minutes? Is there performance tuning that needs to be made so that you can have an effective move of your database, not only from the, yes, we can process the SQL calls, but more importantly, can we do it and still meet our SLAs? We'll talk about upgrading from one version to another of a Netezza appliance. We'll talk about the integration of Optim test data management, migrating from one operating system to another. We have a lot of customers who are moving from proprietary operating systems to open source like Linux. And we'll talk about extending the performance analysis you can do with other database tools from IBM. So that's the agenda, that's the overview for what we're going to cover today. So in terms of introduction, my name is Frank Fillmore. I'm a principal in the Fillmore Group, IBM champion, DB2 Gold consultant. I've been working in this space for over 25 years of IBM information management software. The types of things that the Fillmore Group does is work with DB2 for z/OS and Linux, Unix, Windows. We work with the IBM DB2 Analytics Accelerator, that's the IDAA, which extends the processing capability for analytical workloads on DB2 for z/OS by marrying or integrating Netezza into the traditional mainframe environment, basically bolting those two platforms together. Within the Optim family of products, we work with Guardium, and Guardium has a role to play in this, and we'll talk about that. And then the test data management and even the application retirement tools. From the InfoSphere space, we work with InfoSphere Warehouse, so we cover all of the major IBM data management platforms, InfoSphere Warehouse, the ISAS, Netezza, and DB2, as well as Informix, and the replication and federation products within the IBM family. So IBM InfoSphere Data Replication and the InfoSphere Federation Server. The Fillmore Group is an authorized training partner, so you can receive IBM branded education both in public classes that we hold here in beautiful downtown Towson, Maryland, USA, where I'm delivering the webinar from today, as well as an IBM software reseller. So we can provide you with a complete package of software or appliance, as the case may be, implementation services, and IBM authorized training. To provide a framework for what it is that we're working with today, I wanted to bring this slide up. This is an overview of IBM's information governance lifecycle management, the framework within which that occurs. So there are 4 major pillars that you can see here: discover and define, develop and test, optimize and archive, and consolidate and retire. And this goes from birth to death, if you will, of an application, from the time that the initial requirements are uncovered all the way through, we don't need this application anymore, we're going to need to move on. And I'm working with companies now who have core applications that have gone through 4 and 5 major upgrades, different platforms that they've worked on, different operating systems, different user interfaces, from 3270 terminal emulation using green screen, all the way up through the iPad as the GUI interface. So the one that we're most interested in here, which is encircled with a slightly off-color green around develop and test. And just so you know, to provide a little bit more background, the discover and define portion of this, discover where data resides, classify and define relationships, and define policies. The IBM products that underlie that functionality requirement are things like InfoSphere Discovery, the Business Glossary, and the InfoSphere Data Architect, the old Rational Data Architect tool. For Optimize, Archive, and Access, the Optim Data Growth Management. So the idea is being able to offload data from, let's say, an ERP system, so that you're not keeping transactions from 10 years ago in your core database. You can move those off. They're still available for compliance and for the purposes of being able to address lawsuits if they occur in your organization. So for legal requirements, you can have this data around, but you're not slowing down day-to-day transaction processing. And then finally, consolidate and retire, the InfoSphere Optim application consolidation suite of products, including, again, ERP. But the one that we're interested in today is the develop and test. And the products that are in this pillar that you see here, develop and test database structures and code, create and refresh test data, capture and replay production workloads. The products that comprise this set of functionality are the Optim Test Data Management, Optim Masking Solutions, and then finally the Optim Query Capture and Replay that we're going to discuss today. So what are some of the enterprise changes that can cause production problems and the requirement for testing? So overall growth, working with a customer that has made 2 major acquisitions within a year of the Fillmore Group helping them to implement a large replication topology. So we needed to absorb 1/3 more users than the customer was running at the time that we implemented the solution. And fortunately, we were able to accommodate all the growth, but the idea is that growth happens organically. We grow because we're doing a good job and customers want more of what we have, and also through mergers and acquisitions, and that can be orders of magnitude growth. You can double or triple. We see some web firms that are just exploding in terms of orders of magnitude growth month over month, let alone year over year. We have hardware and software platform changes. So we may move from a proprietary, let's say an HP Unix operating system to an open source Linux, or move from Sun Solaris to IBM Power Systems. We're seeing a huge amount of that. The Oracle company is losing market share month over month, year over year in the Solaris platform, and a lot of people are going either to open source or IBM proprietary platforms. Software upgrades for operating systems, for patches and fix packs, all these types of things occur on a regular basis. Also, hardware and software consolidations. We're seeing a lot in terms of server consolidation to reduce the footprint, the whole smarter planet approach that IBM is taking of having fewer, more powerful servers instead of rack upon rack of servers with all of the electrical consumption and air conditioning and other types of things that need to be managed. So server consolidation is very important. Also consolidation into the cloud. You can use other vendors' platforms. So making sure that you can still meet your SLAs when you're not running on a computer that sits in the back office a few feet away, but maybe on a vendor platform hundreds or thousands of miles away. And then finally, application deployment and enhancement changes. We are constantly upgrading the applications that we develop in-house, adding new functionality from packaged applications. So all of these are contributing to the requirement for change. As you can see from this slide, there is an enormous amount of complexity that we are dealing with. So we have our internal employees who are accessing our systems. We have call centers. We have business partners, other tradespeople who are involved, suppliers and vendors that are operating as part of a closely knit group. In Japanese, they call it the keiretsu, but the group of vendors who all work together to comprise something like a Sony Electronics or a Toyota automobile. And then we have our end users who are accessing our systems via the internet, and they could be from anywhere, and they could all access. We could have thousands of users want to access our product all at once if we release a new product or we have a new service or offering that could appear and be released to the marketplace. We have lots of different business units: sales and marketing, product management, consulting services. And then we have the databases. So we have lots of different databases that work together. We have operational data stores. We have CRM systems. We have data warehouses. And then the transaction processing systems that we've been managing for 40 plus years. And then all of the different servers that comprise these core systems, whether they're app servers, whether they're web-enabled, whether they're traditional COBOL CICS. Lots of that's still out there, still delivering value for customers. So it's a very complex environment, and the thing that we want to isolate here in Query Capture Replay is the ability to manage tests within the database environment. So again, looking at this, I want to get my highlighter. This is the area where we're going to be most concerned in the data platform and being able to manage change within that data platform. So, What if things don't go well? What if we have to change? What if we apply a hardware upgrade, or what if we apply a patch to the system which won't affect anything, and it does affect something? Well, we may have a problem with customer satisfaction. This could be our internal customers in payroll and finance and marketing, or these could be end user customers who are trying to buy our product through the web, whether we're e-commerce vendors like Amazon or Sears, or banks like JP Morgan Chase. All of these have web-facing, customer-facing applications, and if an upgrade doesn't go well, loss of confidence by our customer base could lead to lost customers. The second is higher costs. Right now, with the sort of manual roll your own testing environments that we need to build, it can be very time consuming and expensive and error prone. Also, if a test development project doesn't go well, we need to roll back those changes and try again in the future. So if you've ever been a part of an abortive update process, you know just, again, how expensive that can be, where you have to roll back the changes and then reapply them at a future date, and basically redo the work that you've already done. And then finally, delays due to the extra testing cycles. So right now, there are products on the marketplace today that allow us to emulate workload and be able to use that for testing, and that usually works from the application side rather than from the database perspective. And this may work well for transaction processing, but may not emulate very well batch processing, which may run concurrently with OLTP. So integrating those two together. So these are some of the challenges that we face. So how do we, what are the costs associated with this? And you can see some, based on some studies that are cited here, loss of customer satisfaction. 59% of the Fortune 500 companies estimate 1.6 hours of downtime per week. So that's over 90 minutes of downtime per week. And at a cost, based on a Gartner report, of $10,000 per minute. So we're talking about 1.6 hours per week, or 90 minutes per week at $10,000 per. That's $1 million a week that production outages are costing our organizations, potentially through poor testing or through implementation of application changes without testing because it was too time consuming or difficult. And then finally, the delays due to extra testing cycles for poorly planned or poorly executed testing to ensure that these changes have gone in successfully, resulting from misconfigurations, configuration parameters, misapplied patches, or patches that cause problems that we were not aware of due to testing. So we may need to do the work over again, and this happens in 6 out of 10 occurrences. So how can we mitigate some of these risks? How can we mitigate the testing risk and try to reduce the outages and the customer dissatisfaction? So the working paradigm of query capture replay, the reason that it was developed was to use actual production workloads for testing, not simulations, not scripts, not batches that we devise, but the actual query, insert, update, delete, select that is running through the pipe against the database real time in the production database. So we can develop a broad approach to testing covering the full application development lifecycle, from the first design requirements through all of the maintenance that occurs and finally through retirement. And include database workload and replay as part of the existing testing procedures. So this is not meant to forestall any other type of testing, but I can give you a perfect example of how this fits in with existing testing. Had a customer last year going through a series of Oracle to DB2 database migrations. And as part of their testing process, of course, there was rigorous functional testing, QA testing. Then there was performance testing, which took up the bulk of the time because they were moving their PL SQL into the DB2 environment, needed to make sure everything worked. And so we had new indexes to build and MQTs and even some recoding of SQL application. But the final testing that was done was on the morning of production cutover. Database servers would come up, applications were pointed to the new database servers, all the data was moved from old to new, and they would bring in their own employees who happened to be banking customers, who did online banking with this organization, and they would have those employees go into their accounts and execute transactions, look up balances, transfer funds, make payments, specifically to test the application with a quote-unquote real production workload. Now, this was a lot smaller in terms of volume, but they wanted to test things that hadn't been tested any other way. So they rounded up literally hundreds of employees who had to come in at 6 in the morning to be able to run this production workload. Query, capture, replay takes away the requirement to do that. You don't need that anymore because now you can capture production workload at any time, including all of your customers, not just your employee customers, and enable you to be able to test the workload using real transactions. So one of the other challenges with testing is that test environments are usually not that robust. Test environments involve much smaller scale, maybe a subset of the data, subset of the services. Maintaining a full volume production test environment can be very expensive, but without a volume test environment, you may very well be below the kink point in the curve so that you test with 100 users or 1,000 users, even when your usual production workload involves tens of thousands of users, and everything works great, and you cut over to production, and then you find out that, yes, you can handle 1,000 users, but you can't handle 10,000. So it's the overall point of this slide is it's difficult to mirror production workloads and tests because of growing user volumes, limited test scripts, the complexity of the systems, and the expense involved. So what we want to do, at least in terms of the application SQL, is mirror the differences between what is happening in the production environment, that is the actual OLTP transactions that are run, the analytical transactions that are being run, batch that's being run, and real-time capture all of that, everything that's going through the pipe to the database, and be able to isolate that and then replay that against the test environment. And there are a couple of ways we can mitigate the fact that it may not be full volume, and we'll talk about those later. So I may not have to have full volume data. I may be able to tune the replay environment to simulate higher volumes of transactions or double the speed with which transactions are run. So before I get into the scenarios, I want to try to see if there are, number one, any chats. I'm not seeing any messages posted so far, so that's okay. And then in terms of attendees, I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I'm going to assume that I am covering the material at the pace and level of detail that you need, and I'm going to keep on doing it. But again, don't forget to use the flyout and be able to either enter a question via the chat or raise your hand, and I'll try to catch that and make sure that we can address your questions. So what are some of the capture and replay use cases? How can I deploy this product? In what situations will it provide benefit? So I need to test existing production SQL workload on different hardware, say Oracle Sun to IBM System P, operating system, Linux to Unix, version of the database, so DB2 version 9 to version 10, or with different database configuration parameters. I once had a customer that had a production environment in which most testing occurred. They had a 2-week lead time for a change request. So what that meant was, and they can only change one thing at a time to mitigate the impact risk of making too many changes. So production DB2 environment, a financial services firm. So I had a consultant that was working with them. They would make a change in the production environment, wait 2 weeks, make the next change in the production environment, wait 2 weeks, and extended the configuring and the performance tuning of the system by months. It was enormously expensive from a manpower standpoint. So this gives us the opportunity to test those types of changes very quickly in a test environment and can do that over and over again. We need to test application enhancements. We're adding new functionality to the application. We've done all the QA testing, so how is this going to work in our production environment? For heterogeneous database migration, so we can capture PLSQL on Oracle RAC and replay on DB2. So not only can you test to ensure that your application PLSQL is compatible with DB2, but also see the efficiency with which it performs and see if you need to make any changes. You can validate the compatibility. There are lots of ways to do that. There are tools that you can use to see if the PLSQL is going to work effectively against the DB2 database. And as I said earlier, that IBM's rating is in the high 90s of the percentage of compatibility. But now you can also see if that's going to work in an efficient fashion. You can increase data volume, so you can double the amount of data in the database because, for example, again using financial services, for competitive purposes, a lot of banks are now keeping more historical data online. When online banking was first available, you could probably get transactions from the last 30 days. So in order to compete, other banks kept 60 days and then 6 months and then a year, and now pretty much most of the financial services organizations that I deal with will keep 2 years of transactions online. So if you have an annual tuition bill or you have an annual subscription, you can look that up and see the last time you paid it, which is very convenient. But now we are increasing the data volumes that we're keeping online by a factor of maybe 12 or 24. And what impact is that going to have on the way that the database is running, on the way that the transaction runs against the database? And then finally, we can vary the timing and speeds. So let's say we can move to a server which has 2 times the processing speed. We can double the speed at which the transactions are replayed so that we can see if we're going to scale in a linear fashion, or if we double the speed with which the transactions are being processed, that double the processing capacity still can't keep up. So, InfoSphere Optim Query Capture Replay. This is what it looks like from a high level. Pardon me. So to get my highlighter out again, this is my source database against which I'm running. My applications are out here. And there is a component that gets installed actually within the database called an STAP, borrowing some technology from the Guardium family, which will monitor and actually capture all of the SQL that is occurring against the database. Batch, online transaction processing, decision support, deep analytics, whatever is going against the database is being captured, and it's being captured for all of these databases. So one of the key differentiators of the IBM solution is the heterogeneous database support. You don't have to be a DB2 customer in order to benefit from Optim Query Capture Replay. You could be a pure Orange shop. You could use Oracle for everything and still benefit from this because you can test the impact that database server changes, operating system version changes, etc. All the things that we talked about before just for the Oracle database, just for the SQL Server database, Teradata, Sybase, MySQL. So if you're committed to open source, I want to move this from DB2. I actually have a customer today that has made a huge commitment to move away both from Oracle and SQL Server, Oracle and DB2 to MySQL. They've decided to move to open source databases, and I don't know if I think that's a wise decision, but I'm not the one that's paying the bills, and so they get to pick. But wouldn't it be a good idea for them to be able to test their online transaction processing for their e-commerce site to see if it's still if MySQL is going to be able to scale and keep up? And so finally, once we capture all of the transactions, we play that now against a test database someplace else. Could be the same database, could be a different one, different hardware, different operating system, different database server. So that, in a nutshell, is an overview of what Query Capture Replay does. Oops. So as I mentioned before, the STAP is placed in the database environment. You notice this is actually a much better drawn graphic because with the STAP is installed within the database server as a component. I'll give you an example of that in a second. Some of the folks that I deal with from IBM want to make sure that you understand that this is not a security product like Guardium. It's using some Guardium technology to solve a completely different business problem. That is test environment, managing the test environment and managing application and software testing, not a security or governance issue of determining whether trusted users are getting into your database and doing things that they shouldn't do. That's what Guardium does. So it's taking the technology that IBM acquired when it purchased Guardium and now using that, benefiting from that in deploying it in another fashion. Then there is the query capture replay server. This is an appliance. This is software running in an appliance that actually receives the SQL. Let me bring my highlighter up here again. That receives the SQL and actually captures that in the server and then allows you to replay the SQL as it's run against the test database down here. Now, I actually participated in the beta. The Fillmore group was one of about a dozen companies worldwide that participated in the QCR beta, and we did not use the appliance. We just used a VMware image of the Guardium server, which in this case is the QCR server, to be able to capture the data in the same server. So we were at a much smaller scale. We were testing and looking at things like install, usability, not looking for volume. So I'm not sure, but I believe that a VMware version is going to be available for this product, so you don't need a separate appliance. And I may check with some of my IBM folks to confirm that, but I know that at least during testing that the VMware image was available. So just to summarize, this may be a separate product, this may be a separate platform, an appliance, or it may run within an existing server. So just so you can see, when I tested this on a small Windows system, I brought up the services panel within Windows, and here is where the STAP is. So it runs as a service within the database server. So this Windows machine had DB2 installed, and that was where the DB2 tap service was installed. And that needed to be started and running in order to capture the workload. This is just a quick screenshot of the VMware image that we used for the beta as the appliance that managed the capture, that is, received the SQL from where the STAP was installed, and then gathered and captured all of that SQL that was playing out for later replay. So this is the service. So this screen that we're looking at right here is this box right here. Give me my highlighter. This box right here. And then finally, all of this was managed via GUI. So I was, you post to the URL of the query capture replay server, whether it's the appliance or the VMware image, and you can see the steps here: capture a workload, prepare a workload, replay a workload, etc. Those are the steps, and we're going to talk about the steps involved, but this is the GUI interface run from any browser accessing the query capture replay server that allows you to run the test scenarios. So again, I'd like to pause at this point before we move on. Actually, one more screen, so if you can formulate some questions or you have any, a couple more screens. Number one, the Optim Query Capture Replay enables realistic testing using the actual production workload. So again, going back to the earlier screen, I hate to keep jumping back and forth on you, but I think it's important to orient what we're doing. This is our production environment. This is where our applications are running. These are where our batch jobs, all of the analytics are occurring, and then running SQL, select inserts, updates, and deletes against the database. Right here, the STAP is monitoring all of that traffic as it goes by before it hits the database and enables you to capture that SQL workload in production in the appliance, in the server. So again, we have a production database. We have SQL running against that database from any of a variety of applications. And the query capture replay server is using the STAP to gather the SQL. We can have as points of consistency from the production production SQL that we're seeing the original application timing. So if the transactions are coming through at 1,000 every minute or 10,000 every minute, we can capture that original application timing. We know how fast the SQL is running against the database, and that this transaction followed 0.2 of a second after the transaction before it. We get the order of execution. So we do the insert into the primary key table first, and then the insert into the foreign key table. So we maintain transactional consistency. So we're not going to be violating referential integrity rules. We maintain transaction boundaries, that is the commit scope. The isolation levels, so the locking that is being held on the database at the time that the transactions are running. So are we using cursor stability or repeatable read to use the DB2 forms? And then we're capturing the performance metrics, actually how well this SQL performed, and then the key SQL and application characteristics when we do the replay against the test database for what we've captured. So what distinguishes the IBM product suite? First of all, the broadest platform support, and I think this is one of the key differentiators, meaning that you can have a single test tool regardless of what your database environment looks like. Oracle, DB2, SQL Server, Sybase, MySQL, and Formix pretty much covers the waterfront. I would say that there are obviously other database servers out there, but I would say most customer shops have some collection of those database servers, and now you have a single tool to manage within your environment for all of your database server testing. The question that I always get, usually before this point, is what's the impact on processing? Was it Aristotle that said to dissect we destroy? So if we are down there in the database server and we have the STAP installed, what is the overhead? And IBM testing and the beta testing says that it's pretty negligible. And that's also true of the technology used for Guardium and security purposes. So this is a well-tested organizational means of capturing this information within your environment. So it's not something new. You don't have to worry about. You install the STAP, and now you're going to screw up your production environment trying to get the test information you need to avoid screwing up your production environment. That's not the point here. It wouldn't make much sense as a product if that happened. Scalable for the enterprise. There is not currently a version of this product for DB2 for ZOS, but that is in the works, and I believe that it's going to be available in the fourth quarter. So it scales to the level of IBM mainframes, being able to capture database transactions at that level. And there are some additional capabilities specific to the DB2 database. Obviously, IBM knows the internals of DB2. And so if you have a DB2 shop, if that's really where your focus is, there are some additional benefits to be realized. Just checking the time, I think we're proceeding at a pretty good pace. Again, if anybody has any questions, you want to raise your hand or post them in the chat. Still not seeing any, so don't forget to use that if it would be of benefit.
Hey, Frank, I just wanted to break in and just tell you that I think you're doing a marvelous job with the highlighter today.
You like the highlighter?
I think the highlighter's wonderful. Great job.
Oh, good. Well, it is confusing, and it's a new product for everybody. I mean, it's only been out for a couple of months, so I wanted to make sure that everybody understood how the pieces went together. It's sort of, they get the framework. So thank you for the compliment. Any questions that you have that you'd like to add that you think other people might be asking themselves?
No, I think this is covering it very well, and I think one of the things, this is, a classic IBM introduction to a product. What does it cover? Everything. What does it support? Oh, pretty much everything. And I guess it is, sometimes it's hard to, it's almost harder to understand it with a lot of these tools that they do so many different things.
Understood. So let's thank you again for the kind words, and let's keep rolling. We're about 2/3 of the way through. We're about 2/3 of the way through our time, so we have a little bit more to go, and hopefully we'll have some time for some additional questions at the end. So the workflow, the actual process that you follow, is pretty straightforward. You capture the workload on the existing production environment. You prepare it, and we'll talk about what preparation means, but it includes managing the test environment, creating the backup or the restore the test environment so you have test data to run against. You replay the transactions that you have captured from the production environment, and you can do that for 5 minutes or an hour or 2 days. It's up to you as to what is the most important. You can capture your workload during prime transaction processing from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can capture your batch workload from midnight till 8 a.m. And then finally, you compare and analyze the efficiency with which the SQL was executed, and then repeat. So what is it? Shampoo, rinse, conditioner, and repeat. It's the same sort of thing. It's an iterative process. So you could make additional changes. You could add indexes or MQTs. You could change some database server parameters. You could apply different patches or do an upgrade to a new version of the database. Maybe move from 9.7 to DB2 version 10, and then iterate the changes again as many times as are necessary to get the performance that your application requires. So, an example, upgrading the database from DB2 version 9.7 to DB2 v10. That was the introduction that we did before. The production environment is AIX version 5.3 running DB2 9.7. We do the record. We place the STAP in the production database. We record to the appliance, to the QCR server. We prepare the test data, meaning that we take a database backup. So actually the preparation and the test data, before the transactions are run, we take a snapshot. And this can be done a variety of different ways. We can split a mirror. We can take an existing database server backup. We can replicate the data from the production environment to the test environment so we have a copy of the database server as it was when the testing started. We then replay against the database server, running the SQL as it would run from the application, using the existing timings, using the existing isolation level configuration parameters that we've defined and so forth. And then we analyze the results. We get the report out and we see the timings of the SQL, how long you can compare side by side. This SQL statement ran in this amount of time, within the milliseconds or the microseconds, and then this is the way it ran in production, and then this is the way it ran in the test environment. And do you need to make any changes in order to improve that? And then repeat the system. So let's look at another test scenario. So in this case, we're migrating from an Oracle database to DB2. So the production environment, we're running AIX. Notice that somebody didn't make a lot of changes to this environment. So they were pretty much consistently using AIX regardless of the database server that they were using. But now they're going to take their Oracle v10, which is a really old version of Oracle, and run that against AIX 5.3, capture that workload, and then replay the PLSQL that's running in those applications against DB2 version 10 running on AIX version 6.1. And again, capture, prepare, do the backup and restore. How do I back up an Oracle database and restore it to a DB2 environment? There's actually a tool that's available for free from IBM called the IDMT, the IBM Data Movement Tool. So I can take a backup of my Oracle database and restore it to the DB2 database and be able to run this test suite. I could upgrade to a new version of the Netezza TwinFin. So capture or record the transactions as they're occurring against the TwinFin, prepare the test data on the test system, replay against the version +1 of the TwinFin, and see if we're able to get improvements in performance, if we can meet tighter SLAs for the analytics requirements that we have on the Netezza. Now, we can leverage Optim test data management. So, for example, we can create a subset. Most of what we've talked about to this point remains true, but now we can create a consistent set of subset of test data using the Optim test data management. What does that mean? Well, I may not want to create a test environment that contains full data volumes, but I need to ensure that all my referential integrity constraints are honored, so that if I have the customer master record and the customer address record and the beneficiary record, and all of those hang off the customer record via foreign keys, that the subset of customers, all of their existing customer data is all of their addresses and beneficiaries and accounts and transactions are maintained in the subset of data that I'm extracting from the production environment and loading onto the test environment. So I can actually run against a subset volume of the data and use the test data management, a separate tool acquired from Princeton Softtech a few years ago by IBM, to now manage that environment. So we're taking the develop and test set of products and using them together to save money, so that we don't have to have as much DASD and processing horsepower in order to be able to test our production environment. So what are some of the other tools that we can use? We've talked about the test data management. We can use the Optim Performance Manager, which is the IBM performance tuning tool for their database, and the Optim Query Workload Tuner. So you can actually do a much deeper dive. These products are integrated, so you can actually monitor at the transaction level the way that the SQL is being processed, and do tuning analysis real time while it's running. So while you're replaying your production workload against your test environment, you can use the Optim Performance Manager and the Query Workload Tuner to be able to help you understand the changes that need to be made in the environment. So if you're moving a PLSQL workload into DB2, I may need to create some indices. I may need to create some additional MQTs. I may need to change configuration parameters. So you can see the Optim Configuration Manager within that environment. So this is, now, it's not a requirement. I don't want you to think you have to buy 5 different things in order to make this useful. But the idea is that these products can work together towards a cohesive whole, and each additional product that you add is going to save you time in managing your test environment. So, implementing the InfoSphere Optim Query Capture Replay by fully assessing change impact before you make the changes, mitigating change impact risk, what are you doing? Well, you're improving customer satisfaction. You can anticipate and correct potential problems before you are live in production with customer-facing applications. You can reduce the cost of change. You can make the changes with a much greater degree of confidence. You don't have to worry about the backouts or rework, or being up until 3 in the morning of the day of the go live date, trying to correct problems that could have been captured sooner, and not having to deal with those in the live production environment. And then finally, find ways to meet better SLAs. Organizations are going to be increasing data volumes, customer volumes, transaction volumes. You can actually run a captured workload at 2 times the speed and say, if we double our customer transaction processing, what impact is that going to have on the database server? Is it going to be able to keep up? Do we need to add more hardware? Do we need to make other changes in order to satisfy that? So for capacity planning purposes, you can anticipate this and meet it head on in advance of going into production and finding out when it's too late. So the way that the Optim solutions for data lifecycle governance work, we didn't talk a lot about the Discovery product, but the Discover product allows you to see relationships between data sets that may not have any obvious relationships. So let's say I was able to acquire a company that had a set of customer records, or I acquired another manufacturer, and I was able to look at this data and see consistency, even if the field names were different, even if the column names were different, that this is customer data, this is a social security number, this is an account number, this is a name, and be able to see the consistency between those two different sets of data and then be able to marry those together. So this goes beyond the query capture replay, solving the test environment management problem, and now allows me to get a fuller understanding of my data overall. Managing test data, we talked about this using the test data management. There are masking tools that allow me to take production data and be able to mask that data so that I'm not using personal information like a social security number or a date of birth or a credit card number, which could violate compliance rules in a test environment or introduce new risk of trusted user abuse of a system by gathering that data and using it for purposes that are not allowed. We've talked about the capture and replay, and then finally the archive, the ability to subset my data, so move stale data from the transaction processing system, keep it for compliance purposes in another data store, retire an application. One of the customers that we worked with that was looking at an archiving solution is a nuclear power generator manufacturer. And for as long as that generator is in service, which could be decades, they need information about the parts, the actual equipment that was used in the assemblies for that generator. Now you can imagine for 3 or 4 decades the useful life of a power plant, how many different application, hardware, database server upgrades this customer is going to have to go through, but they need to maintain access to that data because they need to report for compliance purposes and to mitigate what could be a substantial risk if that power plant is not properly maintained. So how can you accelerate the QCR time to value? Number one, the Fillmore Group has a quick start offering. If you would like assistance on installing, configuring, and using the product, we've been through the beta. There's no formal training that I'm aware of at this point. So to help you as a co-pilot get value for a trial or a POC, we can help you do that. If you'd like some information about pricing, my colleague Kim May, her email address is on the slide. It's sold by the processor value unit. And Kim, this is where I'd like you to step in. I believe QCR is sold by the PVUs of the production database. Is that correct? You got to come off mute. Or maybe you're not there. So we'll just leave that hanging out there. But
that is correct. That's me.
There you are.
Yes. I'm here. I was on mute. Sorry about that.
No, no worries.
Yes, it is sold by.
It's sold by PVU on the production database. Is that correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. That's what I thought. So you can have a lot of different test environments that you're managing. The test environments are not calculated into the PVU valuation to buy. So it's only the production environment in which you're working. So if you want a technical validation, if you think this is really cool and buzzy and you'd like to be able to get your hands on it, you can for free. There is a query capture replay proof of technology, which is going to be held on Tuesday, November 6, 2012, so in about 3 weeks, at the IBM Technical Exploration Center. That's a tech center, TEC, in McLean, Virginia, in USA. So convenient to people up and down the East Coast, you know, from the Carolinas to New York. If you are available and willing to travel a little bit, it's a 5-hour QCR POT. It will be run from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I know that this has just been released, the proof of technology, the hands-on ability to use this product and see how it actually works. This may be one of the first ones that's being held. So if you want to take advantage of this, again, contact my colleague, Kim May. Her email address is on the slide.
Yes, and Frank, I just wanted to jump in here really quickly. This particular proof of technology, it will be one of the first times the QCR proof of technology is going to be delivered or is going to be available for customers to view. My understanding at this point is that the IBM Mid-Atlantic technical team will be hosting this, and Frank is going to be co-presenting, we're hoping. At this point, we don't have the registration information up on the IBM website yet, and that's why I'm asking people to get in touch with me. As soon as I get that link, I'll send it to you.
Perfect. So if somebody is interested in attending, they can send you an email, and then when the registration, the formal registration process is mounted, then you can give them the links on how to do that.
Exactly, and yes, and I know that the audience today, there are a lot of people on that are watching this webinar that are not located in the Mid-Atlantic region. If you are interested and you're not located in the Mid-Atlantic region, if you reach out to me, I also have in attendance today Tim Wendell, who's on the IBM Inside Sales team, who is supporting QCR. He has colleagues located around North America and probably can find people worldwide if you're looking for someone to deliver POT in your neck of the woods.
Exactly. So thank you. Thank you very much. So finally, we have some resources available to you. And again, I'm going to post this presentation on the Fillmore Group's blog, so you will be able to get access to it. But we actually blogged about QCR after the beta. And have some thoughts there in addition to the presentation that you saw today. The IBM website for Query Capture Replay, so if you want to look at things like system requirements at a detailed level, operating systems, database server, etc. The announcement letter link is in there, and then contact for Kim, both voice as well as email. I'm going to look here. We are almost at the top of the hour. We got this timed, I think, pretty well. I'm going to stay here for another minute or two to see if anybody posts anything in the chat or raises their hands. I've not gotten any questions so far, so I hope everybody wasn't doing their email while we were doing it. It could happen. You know, people are multitasking. But if you could use the flyout. I see a raised hand. Anil? Why don't I just unmute you, Anil? If you have a microphone, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, very good morning, Frank and Kim. A great webinar. Excuse me, a great webinar. It's pretty late here, so I'm gonna go ahead and quickly ask a question. I just have two of them. Does the OQAR, that is the capture replay application during install, if it's created, it created a production-centric database for testing during installation, and thus the TAP agent has to be installed on a DB2 database, or can it be any other database? That is my first question. My second question would be on what was the network speed tested during your beta tests, and did it require any specific network environment? Thank you.
Okay, so those are two great questions. Let me break them out, and if I don't get if I didn't understand the question correctly, please jump in. But in terms of the database, when you install QCR, you're basically doing two things. You're installing the STAP, and the STAP has to go in whatever production database server you want to monitor, where you want to capture the data. So let me, I can bring that screen back up again. Give me just a second, because I think this is the best drawing. Yeah, this one. So in order to run Query Capture Replay, wherever your production database resides is where the STAP goes. Okay. Now, you asked, and so that would be true if you had a DB2 database, Oracle database, Netezza, whichever. The STAP always goes where the production data is, where you're capturing. That's how it gets it. Now, the second question was about the network, and that would be this piece right here. How far was the Query Capture Replay server from the STAP? And in my instance, I cheated because it was all on the same box. I installed the VMware image for the Query Capture Replay server on the same Windows box where the STAP was, where the production database was. So they were communicating at memory speeds. That's probably not the way you're going to run this in a production environment. So you would need to have them very close together. You don't want to have network latency causing a problem. Although I don't know how the Query Capture Replay server queues the data. That is, as the changes occur, they're buffered, I'm sure, so that if the transactions are occurring faster than the network latency allows, that's not going to slow down your production database. And if that became a problem, we'd have to do a little more research to find out how that gets done. And then finally, the last piece, the test data down here, at this point, you could either use a tool like Test Data Management, or the IBM Data Movement tool, or just a backup and restore to create your test database. But the test database is not created as part of the query capture replay installation. That's a separate step that you need to manage.
All right. Thank you very much, Frank.
Sure, you're very welcome. Thank you for your question, and thank you for staying up late. Let me see if there are any other questions. I'm not seeing any. I don't see any chats posted. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I appreciate your time. Look for the materials on the Fillmore Group's website within the next 24 hours, and obviously follow up with Kim or me. You have both of our email addresses. If you have any questions or you'd certainly like to get started, we'd love to hear from you. Kim, any final thoughts?
No, you did a great job, Frank. Thank you. This was a terrific overview.
Good deal. Take care, everyone.